Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me today for another near-death experience interview. I'm really excited to be here with Jim Bruton, and he's going to share about his near-death experience, which is different in some ways from the typical near-death experience that we hear about, as we were just discussing Jim. Let me give you a little bit of background on Jim. He has been fortunate to realize most of his childhood dreams, from watching wildlife television programs as a child to living in Africa and winning an Emmy for his work with National Geographic Television, dreaming of sci-fi gadgets while reading through Popular Mechanics in the 1960s, then shrinking a television truck into a backpack, transmitting live video from all 7 continents of the world, a few which were formerly impossible. His love of vintage aircraft translating from gluing models together as a boy to building and flying 2 historical reproduction airplanes. It was flying and crashing one of his aircraft that led him to the door of his near-death experience. Since that life-changing experience, Jim has written 2 books about his NDE and its integration into his life. He speaks publicly about it and has a YouTube channel. As he was told within his spiritually transforming experience, the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it. So I will have Jim's books and his YouTube channel linked in the description, as well as his website, In Between Productions. Thank you so much for joining me, Jim.
Hi, Melissa. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here with you, and I would love to start out by hearing your near-death experience and everything that led up to that.
Sounds great. And it's great to be here with you and those who join you on your podcast. Thank you. So, as you mentioned, growing up, I really couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do for a living. And I guess the question may still be open. But it was in the realization of the dream of old airplanes that that brought me to the door of my near-death experience. It was the second experimental aircraft I built. It was a historical reproduction of a little French airplane from 1933, really tiny, very whimsical looking. And I lost the engine on my second test flight. And because of the early aviation design, when you cut power, they come down quickly. It didn't glide really well like today's aircraft. So I couldn't make it back to my airstrip. So I just kind of had to, in the forested, hilly, rocky area I had to look for, what I could to bring it down in terms of an emergency landing. And there was a Boy Scout camp nearby with a small lake. So I said, well, I'll just aim for that. And what happened is I overshot the bank and I crashed into all these tree trunks in the equivalent of like a soapbox derby car with a big propeller and engine right in front of my face. I don't know how I didn't eat it, but crashing into all these trees at about 70 miles an hour in a little wooden box, it just instantly exploded into matchsticks. The only part of the airplane still intact was that which was behind me, to which I was still seatbelted. Luckily, even though this was in October, it was October 6, 2016, so it's just over 6 years ago. At that time of year, the Boy Scout camp was closed, but fortunately for me, there was a man fishing nearby. His name was Greg Gubitosi, a retired police officer as well as teacher. Thank heavens he was a police officer, because, he's probably used to seeing trauma like in a car crash or something like that. And so he was fishing, enjoying the peace and quiet of the camp because it was closed until I literally came crashing down. But he ran over, tried to assess the situation and called 911. Again, luckily he had his cell phone on him. I had broken all my ribs and ruptured both lungs. My right leg looked like a pretzel. I had a hole in my lower back from the battery breaking loose and hitting me as a 70-mile-an-hour projectile. My chin was pretty torn up as well. So anyway, maybe 45 minutes later, the medical helicopter came in, and it wasn't too hard to pull me out of the wreckage because, like I said, so much of it was matchsticks on the ground. But they put me in the helicopter and flew me up to Hartford, Connecticut's trauma center, where there was a waiting team, and they took me right in. And a few hours later, when my family and friends started to arrive, I was in a breathing machine. I was intubated with a big tube down my throat and had all kinds of other tubes coming in and going out of me. I'd already escaped from my restraints once, and they had to re-restrain me. And the suggestion was made that with a week's worth of day-long operations coming up, some with only a 2% chance of success, that it would be best to put me into a medically induced coma. So everyone said, sure, no problem, whatever makes it easiest for everyone. So again, without being able to certainly say, because first of all, I was been delirious, and second of all, on pain medication and everything else, there was no way to really be certain of this. But my estimation is that when they put me into a coma here, that's when my near-death experience started. And what's kind of interesting is later on, when I was looking at my computer recuperating in the hospital, I said, I wonder what the last email is I remember seeing or sending. And I scrolled back through, and it literally was 2 days before my crash. So I had that much of my memory just knocked out of me. And so with that little period of amnesia on the front end of the near-death experience, when I came out of the coma about a week later, I would say for another week, my mind really still wasn't functioning. So it's almost like having two bookends of amnesia with this incredibly lucid experience tucked in between. How does that happen? I can't imagine. But as I went into a coma here and my near-death experience started, in contrast to so many near-death experiences where you hear about people going through a tunnel and seeing dead loved ones, maybe they're in a beautiful heavenly landscape, sometimes not, but they might be in the stars, they might be in a void, but basically they're in a usually fairly non-threatening environment. Sometimes it's beautiful. They may see angelic beings, and then they have a life review. They might get some big message, and then they come back. For me, no. However, I did have an experience that may be a somewhat variation on the life review theme. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But for me, it's as if I just had teleported, bam, into this post-apocalyptic landscape. Like imagine whatever largest city you've ever been in, hundreds or 1,000 years after a nuclear bomb went off or a meteor hit or something like that, just a totally, totally dead cityscape. And you're looking out across it at its ruins, and it's just all gray. And above me were all these huge, dark and heavy clouds, like the mother of all storms was getting ready to unload. So there was just this waiting for something big to happen kind of feeling in the air, if you will. And as I looked around, I saw this large egg-shaped sculpture. You can see it on the wall right behind me. There's a depiction I created of it. And it was like made of open lattice work. And you could see through it. And I was looking around, all of a sudden I got hit by this wave of nausea, like this incredible pain in my abdomen. And I remember saying something like, I don't think I can stand this. And when I said that, I heard all these little whirrings of like gears inside that egg-shaped sculpture. And as I looked, I could see little tiny motions within. So I made my way over to it. And as I looked through the open lattice work, I could see just freely suspended in the air, lots and lots and lots of little gears. But these were a special kind of gear called a sector gear. When you think of a gear, you normally think of a wheel with little teeth all the way around it, like you might see in a clock or something. A sector gear is like a pie slice of that, if you will. And it's a piece of the gear, and it's meant to rotate back and forth, meaning it has a beginning, a middle, and an end to its movement, in contrast to a round gear that just goes around and around. And as I looked at the gears, some were very clear and definite, and some were more ghost-like and they could just pass through each other. It's like they were just kind of idling, in like fish swimming in a tank, if you will. And when I looked at them, though, whatever one I looked at, it's like a video feed would play in my head. And obviously that video feed was what that gear represented. And in these visions, if you will, these video feeds, I could see myself as an older person, or I could see my children grown with their own children. So I realized, oh, these are all events from my future. And at one point, I was looking, and I just sort of said out loud or thought out loud, what is this thing? And this disembodied voice came and was with me the entire time. It said, this is the future birthing into the now. This is the process of becoming. And I thought, okay, well, like I said, since some of the gears looked very concrete and definite and some were not, I put my hand through the latticework to see if I could touch them. What would they feel like? And as I did, one brushed by my hand, and again, I doubled over in pain, but with a reflex, I grabbed it and pulled it through the latticework out and threw it away. And all of a sudden, all the gears started spinning around like a hive of angry hornets or something until they settled down. I said, what's happening now? And the voice said, each gear is the probability of a thought, word, or action in your future. Your destiny is resetting itself around what you've removed. And I think it's significant because when we say those gears represented a thought, word, or action, that's why they were designed to move in such a way that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's why it was that particular type of gear. I've never seen one of these gears in my life. Found out since then they're in motorcycle transmissions. They might be in different clock-like mechanisms, but I had never, for all the gears I've seen in my life, they were always just the round kind. Anyway, I said, well, how did I know I could do that? Pull that gear out and remove that future moment. And the voice literally asked me, why else are you here? I said, I have no idea. I don't even know what this place is. Remember, it's not like I at any point was saying I'm about to die or I'm about to have a near-death experience. I crashed. I'm like, la la land, and next thing I know, I'm in a coma. And it said, you're in the in-between. And I said, in between what? And it said everything. The impossible now between the past and the future. And I said, that makes no sense whatsoever. And it said, it's impossible in its short duration. But here you are, standing inside the eternity of a single moment. So do you remember the world to which your body belongs? And I remember concentrating really hard. And I remember thinking, at least later, that if someone had come up and said, if you stay here any longer, you can't go back, I'd say, go back where? To Earth or whatever. And say, Earth what? And if it said, well, to your family, I'd say, what family? And so I said, I have no idea. And the voice then said, then you see the truth in how the past is dust. I said, okay. I said, well, why do some of these gears, these futures that I touch, cause pain and some not? And it said, all choices have unintended consequences, some unfortunate and some not. The pain each brings is your guide. And I said, where are the gears that feel good? And it said, you're not here to feel good. And then I saw a new gear swinging into view. And on this one, I saw happy grandchildren that I have yet to have. They're on a ride at an amusement park, and they were smiling and laughing, as if they were looking at me, but obviously threw me into their own world. And I, of course, let that gear pass by. I wouldn't want to remove that one. And so I just kept looking at the movement of the gears and really paying attention to how some seem very definite, some not. And I think my analysis, my post-game analysis, was that the ones that were very definite were probably the ones that have more certainty to come about, or they're maybe closer in time. Whereas the ones that were more ephemeral were either further out in time or perhaps less likely to come about, but still a possibility. Anyway, each time they came to rest, I would sort of use pain to search around until I touched one that hurt, and then I would remove it, and then the whole thing would recycle. And, at some point I felt bad that I didn't have a better moral compass to make these choices, because what I was removing were choices that would be to my spiritual detriment. And that pain I was feeling was the pain that choice would cause, if not me, someone else. And so this is why I say, in a way, it's kind of like a life review, but one with actionable intelligence. You can actually do something about it. You can actually, whereas many near-death experiences are very passive. This one required my interaction. This required me doing something, making a choice. And the choice was to remove as many bad choices in my future as I was given time and opportunity to do. And that way kind of stack the deck, if you will, going forward, leaving myself more good choices or even neutral choices than bad ones. So anyway, I just kept going through this over and over. And at one point I looked at this growing pile of gears behind me, and I said, it's starting to look like if I don't have a bad future, I have no future at all. I said, even though I feel less pain because it's like I'm loosening up that load, am I going to die sooner from doing all this? And the voice said, your destiny has to fit itself around futures that aren't meant to be. Your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one. I said, I don't know how comforting that is. And they said, well, eliminating bad choices doesn't mean you won't make wrong ones. It's not necessarily a sin to make a mistake, right? Said you won't know they are wrong until after they pass. And since right and wrong are variables over which you have no control, the answers to what come tomorrow are a waste. It's better to simply understand the beauty of how everything fits and refits together. Basically, have faith in the grand design, that I know what I'm doing. I said, okay. I said, well, what am I missing here in my lack of understanding? Because it was obvious this thing was a lot bigger than me. And it said, what is clearly before you? Grace. No one deserves salvation. It can only be given by grace. It is your birthright, but it has to be chosen at the expense of the world that separates us. And I said, well, this fixing my future is painful. And like I said, I kind of feel ashamed I don't have any better moral compass than pain. I don't even know where or when these futures happen. And it said when or where are not important, but removing your enthusiasm to further chain yourself to the world isn't as painful as carrying the crushing weight of those chains once they're forged around you. And I said, it's as if this place was designed, kind of like a maze for a mouse. I said, it's designed like there's only one thing I can do and no chance to mess it up. And it said, if those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy. You can't change the past, but you can make better choices in the future. Everything is interconnected, and pay more attention to your relationships. Be gentle with everyone as I'm gentle with you. And I remember thinking about all this pain I'd experienced. I said, what's gentle about all this? I said, you prayed for something for which being here is the answer. And now the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it. And those were its parting words. And I took one last look at the pile, at the sky, at the city, and at the egg. And I said, I think I can live with this now. And with that, it's like it just faded from view and I was gone. Yeah, it was definitely more than me, that's for sure. And I am so grateful to have had it. And late afterwards, as I, like I said, when I came out of the coma, it was still another week before I had a functioning mind, as all the, I guess, drugs had to wear off and stuff. And I really came to not in the main hospital, but in the rehabilitation hospital. And I would say my first memory literally was this memory of this event. And it was just like as if it were just cycling over and over in my head. And with each iteration, there was more depth, more detail, more of an emotional impact. And I was like, what in the world is this? It's just as somebody had stuck a cassette in my head with a pre-video thing. And it was really strange. And I did know about out-of-body experiences. I'd heard of near-death experiences, but I don't think I was as conversant on what their hallmarks and milestones were. So I was pretty sure this must have been an out-of-body experience I had. And so I remember, it's interesting, later on I read this story, remember the story about grace, or the mention about grace. And it was that this man was, looking for a guru, someone to show him the truth. And he went before him and he said, "Is it true that our destiny is written in our palms?" And the guru said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, so why do I need you?" He said, "Well, just because you know it's going to happen because it's written in your palm doesn't mean you can change it, doesn't mean you can avoid it." He said, "If you want to live by the destiny that's written in your palm, you can, or you can make the choice to live within the grace of God. And that is not tracked by any star. It's not written in any palm." And so I think that was part of the big lesson I was taking away from this, that it, again, no one deserves salvation or whatever, what do we really deserve in life if you think about it? But to live within that grace, you may not have any idea what's going to happen next, but that's part of the fun. That's part of the journey. That's part of the surrender and the letting go, is to literally live by the whimsy of the divine. Just know that you will go where you're supposed to go and you will be where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do if you can live your life with that much surrender. And it's kind of interesting because in the Bible, where it says, "Be still and know that I am God," the more accurate translation is "let go and know that I am God." And I think, my first big lesson, and I, like you said, I've written 2 books. The first one, I went to the International Association of Near-Death Studies annual conference in 2019, which was the last one before COVID hit. And I presented my experience. And some dear friends really pressured me and said, "You've got to go write the book." So I came home and I wrote the book in about 3 months. And it's called The In-Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. And then, like I said, there weren't in-person conferences for 2 years after that. This past year in 2022 was the next one, and I was there for that as well. What happened was a year later, I wrote a second book called, because, through some podcasts and interviews and more interactions with people, they were saying, "How do we put any of this into practice?" So I did my best to see what I could do to articulate that and into a book called The Practice in Between, The Art of Letting Go. And the reason I wanted to have that title was to sort of pay homage to my recuperation time in the hospital. I grew up not drinking. Around, I don't know, the age of 42, if I had a high stress job, I'd come home and make a rum and Coke. And if it was nice, I might have 2 more. And, but I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, though. It wouldn't matter if I was. It's not really part and parcel of the story. But my wife at the time would get a little concerned about it. And while I was laying there in the hospital, the voice came, and I guess we were having a conversation or something, and it removed from me the representation of alcohol. It was sort of suspended in the air in front of me. And literally it said, "What do you want to do with this? Do you want to carry it with you, meaning into your future, or do you want to leave it behind?" It said, if you want to take it with you, I will carry it for you. If you want to leave it behind, I will remove all attachment to it, have no pull on you, be as if you never had a drink in your life. I said, "Leave it behind." And so it literally just like vapor just disappeared. And I don't drink. I haven't had a drink in those 6 years and not inclined to. It's just not part of who I am. And it literally said to me, because I know what a mountain of will it takes for some people who struggle with that. So I don't want to play that down at all. I know it's truly a moment by moment decision. But for me, the voice of the in-between was saying that all the force of will you will ever need is found in the art of letting go. Always live life in celebration of the individual spirit. For no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul. And that's why like I said, I wanted to incorporate that into the title of the second book.
Oh, that's beautiful, Jim. So I wanted to come back to that statement you made, that the only force of will you'll ever need is the art of letting go. That's it seems like two opposing things, the force of will and the art of letting go.